Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan. I'm the Randy Houston part of this thing.
And this is Dave Hogan. Glad to be back with our listeners on Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan. You know, Randy, last time we talked on our last podcast, we talked about the Oak Ridge Boys. We talked about the death of Joe Bonsall and the tragedy that has struck the Oak Ridge Boys during this summer with Dwayne Allen's wife passing away, and also the son of William Lee Golden. I had the opportunity to tour Oak Ridge since we last talked.
Well, tell us about it.
And if you're interested in that sort of thing, that's where the Oak Ridge Boys got their name, by the way, as most people probably know. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was one of the locations for the development of the Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan to end World War II. It's known as the Secret City, just outside of Knoxville. And at that time, early 1940s, mid-1940s, it was a very rural area out there where they built the complex. Oak Ridge was just a small community with a handful of people who had to sell out their homes and leave. You know, the government bought up their property because this was the location of part of the development of the atomic bomb. And that's Wally Fowler was the name of the leader of the Oak Ridge Boys. And it was a closed city. A lot of the people never got to leave the complex to go out and see a movie or any kind of entertainment show. And so the Oak Ridge Boys, Wally Fowler and the Oak Ridge Boys, were allowed to come in and sing occasionally. So that's the name, the Oak Ridge Boys. But on that tour that our listeners might be interested in taking, just contact the people at Oak Ridge. You can Google Oak Ridge and inquire. But it's a bus tour that takes you behind the scenes and explains a lot of the development of the atomic bomb and the uranium enrichment that went on there in Oak Ridge. Just thought I'd throw that in case we have listeners who love to travel, and particularly if you're a history buff. Maybe you saw the Oppenheimer movie that was popular recently. You might want to take that tour of Oak Ridge. It's a bus tour behind the scenes.
Well, we've both played Oak Ridge Boys music for years, both done business with and known Dwayne Allen, and I met Richard Sturban several times. It's one of the, a lot of the sympathies that are being extended to the Oak Ridge Boys family comes from the fact that these were some of the nicest people.
Oh, man.
These, the Oak Ridge Boys, just some of the most top shelf people in an industry of music promoters and lawyers and all, these guys always stood out, top shelf people.
I'll never forget Dwayne Allen visiting me at the radio station, WSKY, in what was then the Northwestern Bank building in downtown Nashville. It's a hotel now.
Right.
That building's been converted to a hotel. But the Oak Ridge Boys had a song out. Who was it baptized in Cedar Creek? They baptized
Jesse Taylor.
Jesse Taylor. The Oak Ridge Boys had that song out. And a lot of the non-gospel radio stations, country music stations, started playing that. They baptized Jesse Taylor in Cedar Creek this morning. And Dwayne Allen was visiting radio stations promoting their music and that song. And he asked me if I thought the Oak Ridge Boys would have a future in country music if they decided, based on the success of this record on country music radio stations. And I've always felt kind of honored that Dwayne Allen would seek out my opinion
Well, of
on
course.
whether they would be successful as country music artists. And of course, I said yes. And I'm sure that my opinion did not influence their decision, but I felt honored to be asked.
Absolutely. I was thinking about that a lot, actually, this morning. It's been a while since we've recorded and talking about the history of country music. And we're going to continue our conversation about the top 10 wealthiest people in the industry. But one of the things, Dave Hogan is a couple of years older than I am and was there at really the birth of this thing we call country music. You were there you were country before country was cool, weren't you?
Well, country music had two big bangs. They call the big bang of country music the recording sessions in Bristol with Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family.
Right.
When Ralph Peer came down to Bristol and set up that recording studio back in the 1920s. Well, there was a second big bang in country music, in my opinion, and that was in the 1960s. In the 1950s, you had Elvis Presley and rock and roll. A lot of stations stopped playing country music and started playing the rock and roll. Then the Beatles came along and further buried country music. But then the country music audience, there was still an audience for country music.
The bass was there.
The bass was still there, and they were pleading and begging for country music. And when we went and started playing country music on WSKY, our popularity just boomed.
Yeah.
And what would be considered today a very small radio station of 1,000 watts, 250 watts at night, didn't cover a large area, but became immensely popular. People would tell me they wrapped cords around their radio and their telephone, try to get the station to come in from out in, over in Maggie Valley. I remember a fella telling me that story. But anyway, there was an explosion of country music in the 1960s, and that's when I entered the business of country music as a disc jockey.
And a promoter of concerts in the Asheville area, the Old City Auditorium. The Country Shindig concerts is where I got to know Dave Hogan. And so you were there at that second big bang. Well, let's continue our conversation about the net worth of some of these people.
Well, I didn't make a $200 million like Tim McGraw and Faith Hill.
How much?
Faith Hill, or rather Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, they lumped them together. Number 5 on our list of country music artists with the greatest net worth, $200 million.
That's amazing, man. Are you a fan of the Taylor Sheridan Western TV series like Yellowstone and 1813?
I watched Yellowstone, but I haven't seen 1813.
It's kind of the prequel to Yellowstone, and that's the one that Tim McGraw and Faith Hill really star in.
And I've heard good things about their acting abilities.
With Sam Elliott. And Tim talks about how became such good friends with Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott. Mm-hmm. Beef. It's what's for dinner.
Yeah.
But they did a fantastic job acting in that TV series, 1813. And I think there's more of those scheduled to be filmed, too.
Well, Tim had some previous experience in doing movies before the shows you're talking about. He was in Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
And also the highly successful movie called The Blind Side. He played a strong role in that.
And, of course, his father, Tug McGraw, right? Yeah.
And, Tim did not know his father, Tug, until he was well into high school.
Teenager, yeah.
And the story is that he was rummaging through a closet looking for something that he needed for a school project, and he ran into his birth certificate, which had the name of his father, his last name. I think I have it written down somewhere. But he found out that Tug McGraw, the baseball player,
Major League Baseball player, yeah.
he was a pitcher, a relief pitcher. Very popular, very successful as a baseball player. But meantime, Tim was very successful as an athlete in high school. So he got his sports abilities inherited from his father. But he and his father connected and became very close in Tim's adulthood. Tug, unfortunately, has passed away, Tim's father. But they're worth $200 million. Faith did the NBC Sunday Night Football theme prior to Carrie Underwood getting the gig, as they say.
Well, we're going to move on to the next one, the fourth highest on the list of net worth, and that's a guy that recently, I think at like age 70, sold 110,000 tickets to one of his concerts.
I'm going to correct you. It was 110,905.
George Strait.
Almost 11,000 tickets.
111,000.
Almost 111,000 tickets.
The largest concert sold anywhere. I think Bob Dylan had the previous record, and George Strait in Texas, of course, just sold 111,000 tickets.
The way it's written here, he set the record for the largest ticketed concert for a single act in U.S. history with 110,905 people at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas. And that is the home of the Aggies, Texas A&M. And we talked about stadium people, country music artists who are able to fill the big, huge stadiums. And George Strait is right there in front.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a singer that can fill one of those huge, huge stadiums. And I like the fact that in show business, you see a lot of divorces, marriages that don't last. And George Strait and his wife, Norma, high school sweethearts, have now been married 53 years.
Wow.
And George and Norma eloped right after they graduated from high school in 1971. George joined the U.S. Army. And as we talked from when we started talking about net worth on our previous podcast, we mentioned that the artists not only have made money singing and writing songs, but endorsements have been a big part of the income of a lot of these artists. And George Strait has had a lifelong relationship with Wrangler, has been their spokesman, and I understand that it's a lifetime contract.
Okay.
So he has been able to capitalize on that. You know, he graduated from college with a degree in agriculture.
I didn't know that.
So if this gig doesn't work out in music, he can fall back on raising hogs or something, you know. But there was tragedy in George Strait's life.
Yes.
George and Norma's life, when their 13-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was killed in an automobile accident back in 1986. And just prior to this, I had met, well, I'd known him for years, actually, Carlton Haney, a promoter of country music. And he was a promoter of George Strait early on, before George became the megastar. And he was visiting me at the radio station in Johnson City, WJCW, and I asked him then. George had a hit record, and I said, "Could you?" And he was talking about promoting George and knowing George Strait, And I said, could you arrange an interview for me with George Strait? And he said, I'd like to do it, but since George lost his daughter, he says he's backed away from doing any interviews. And I won't say that George became a recluse, but if you stop and think about it, you haven't seen George Strait do many television interviews.
Very true.
Very, very, very few.
Very true.
And he's very modest, from what I understand. I've never met George Strait. Very modest individual. And he's an actual cowboy, too. He was raised on a 2,000-acre cattle ranch in Texas, of course. So he's a real cowboy.
One of the records that he holds, kind of near and dear to your heart and mine, by 2009, he broke Conway Twitty's previous record for the most number one hits on Billboard when he 44 number one singles. Conway had 40. Both of them giants in the industry.
And let's move to the number 3 artist in net worth. Let's see, I mentioned George is worth approximately $300 million. And the third artist on the list, ranking number 3, might be a little controversial amongst our listeners who are purists when it comes to country music. But number 3 on the list is Shania Twain, a Canadian. And we were talking about artists who come from modest backgrounds. She did. She's a real rag to riches story. A Canadian born in Windsor, Ontario in 1965, and she has sold over 100 million records, and I guess you would call her music country pop. Her first recording that I remember, and I guess the first song that she had on the country music charts, was a song called Whose Bed Have Your Boots Been Under?
Whose bed have your boots been under? Yeah, yeah.
But she went on to record a lot of music, and particularly in her home country of Canada. A lot of music that became very popular and sold a lot of records, and she is worth $375 million. Shania Twain.
Shania Twain tapped into that economy of a world star, like playing to packed stadiums in London and Tokyo, and yeah, she's big stuff. Big stuff. What's next? I think I know what's next.
Well, Shania Twain, I guess a comparison would be Taylor Swift. You know, Taylor Swift is
of the day.
One of those artists that is, Australia, all over Europe, all over the world, actually, Japan, packing in people to big concerts. And Shania Twain, in her height of her stardom,
right.
was doing kind of the same thing that Taylor Swift is doing now.
Agreed.
Okay, number 2, Garth Brooks.
Wow. Just wow.
$430 million estimated net worth.
Wow.
And I think Trisha Yearwood probably kicked in a buck or two when it comes to their net worth. You mentioned on one of our previous podcasts the artists who have, and I think you mentioned the Garth Brooks, Trisha Yearwood restaurant.
Bar
and restaurant.
Yeah.
Down on Broadway.
I think it's open now.
It's open now, and I saw an interview, I think, on Good Morning America or one of the TV shows, interview with Garth and Trisha in their new place down on Broadway in Nashville. You know, Nashville, we talked about how it's become a Las Vegas of the East, or...
Yeah, I'm hearing that. Yeah.
I predict, mark my word on this, they're going to have a Major League Baseball team in Nashville soon. And in this case, soon would be maybe in the next 5 years.
I love it. NASCAR recently revived the NASCAR Speedway
Nashville
on
Speedway.
their circuit now, and the people of Nashville loved it. Sold out crowds loved it.
Major League Baseball wants to expand, and they want a team in the western part of the United States. And San Antonio is pretty well, I think, from what I read, sewed up that western location.
Makes sense.
In the East, Nashville, which in my opinion is going to be the winner of a franchise. But there are 2 locations in North Carolina in the running.
Really?
One is Charlotte, and one is the Triad. Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area.
Right.
And then I think the other one that's in the running is Norfolk, Virginia, that area. But I think Nashville will be the
winner.
The winner and get the Major League Baseball team in the Major League Baseball expansion. Garth Brooks, quite an athlete. He was a good athlete. Garth, born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he has sold 100 and well. Now these figures are probably larger today. Don't know how old this information is. 162 million records, second only worldwide to the Beatles.
Garth Brooks is some kind of major talent. His family knew of this talent. His brother wrote, I saw an interview with one of his brothers recently where Garth did this bar tour. He played a lot of honky tonks, and that's why one of the major reasons he wanted to build a bar is because he spent so much time
Got
playing.
friends in low places.
And exactly. And his brother talked about how when he graduated out of the bar scene into an auditorium and sold 5,000 seats at a concert, his brother said he called one of their sisters, comes from a large family, and said, at Christmas when we get in the living room and Garth gets his guitar and he mesmerizes the whole family at every holiday, I just saw him do that to 5,000 people.
Wow.
He's magic on stage.
Yeah, his record sales, a lot of record sales, I think, stemmed from his magnetism.
That magnetism
that he has on stage and in these concerts. And you know how many albums, we're talking albums now, how many that you have to sell before it's designated as a diamond album?
Oh, I've always been confused. Platinum is 500,000 and gold is 1 million. And what's diamond?
Diamond is 10 million.
Woo!
Garth has the record for the most diamond albums. He has sold 7. He has 7 diamond albums.
That's incredible.
7 times 10 million is a bunch. Garth Brooks, worth an estimated $430,000. Do we have time to talk about our number 1 artist?
I promise you we have time.
Okay.
I promise you we will make time to talk about the number 1.
Can we make room for Dolly?
Of course we can.
When it comes to country music artists with the greatest net worth, Dolly Parton checks in with an estimated net worth of $650 million.
Oh, amazing.
$650 million.
Amazing.
And how did Dolly make all of her money?
I think most of Dolly's money came from songwriting.
Songwriting, as well as concerts, as well as acting, as well as business. She's a business woman.
On and on and on.
On and on and on and on. And she's one of the most, in my opinion, she is, I'm going out on a limb here, might not agree with me, but I think Dolly's the most beloved American alive.
I won't argue with you at all, brother.
Who would be more beloved than Dolly Parton?
Yeah.
Everybody loves Dolly. Oh, I'm sure there are a few people maybe jealous of her success. Interesting story about Dolly's first national tour. She was on the bill with Willie Nelson. And she said it was an awful, awful experience because she was virtually unknown at the time. Of course, people knew her, people who watched the Porter Wagoner show, but she was nowhere near the star.
Right.
That and you know how it is when I booked shows, you would have your main star.
Yeah. Headliner.
The headliner for the show, and then you'd have another act or two that's
supported, a
notch or two below that would open the show. Well, that's the situation with Dolly, and said a lot of the music people there didn't think that she fit on that show.
That she could open for Willie?
That she could open for Willie.
Wow.
She was not strong enough an opener for Willie Nelson.
That's amazing to think about. That's mind-blowing to think about.
And she said even some of Willie's musicians at the time didn't
cotton to that, huh?
Didn't associate with them on the tour very much. And
wow.
And just kind of, these secondary people over here, get them on and off. Get them on and off the stage. But Dolly, what can you say about Dolly that's not already been said?
Except for Dolly Parton for president. Dolly Parton for president.
I think now would be a good time for her to throw her hat in the ring.
I've already seen that, write in Dolly Parton for president. Gosh, Dave, thank you so much for coming up with this discovery of yours, the top 10 net worths in country music. That's very interesting.
And when we had these music charts, may still have, I'm not in the business anymore as a DJ, but we had these charts of the top 10, and then you had bubbling under.
Yeah. With a bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Blake Shelton almost made it. He's almost in the top 10.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's
wealthy too.
He's one of the runner. Oh, yeah. He's very wealthy.
Thank
and I
you,
guess if it hadn't have been for what Miranda Lambert got in the divorce, he would be there.
That's another podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan. Be sure to press that subscribe button. We'd love to have you downloading every week our shows on Hot Mic with Houston and Hogan. Randy Houston and Dave Hogan.
Be sure to click the subscribe button for another episode of Hot Mic with Randy Houston and Dave Hogan.